And then the third tip that we're going to talk about today is working with columns and rows, because it's all well and good to tell you to put together your metadata and to make sure that you have instructions, but some of you want to get in and get started entering data in Excel. So there's a couple things to keep in mind, especially if you haven't worked with Excel before, in that with Excel, your columns are your headings, and those are alphabetical. You're going to find them running across the top of the Excel worksheet as A, B, C, and it goes on. It pretty much goes on to infinity. And those columns, as in the case of all columns, runs up and down. So you just keep that in mind. Your rows are your records, and those are numerical, and those are listed 1 through and that number also goes on to almost infinity. And those rows of information are going to be running across the columns, running across that line in the column. And so you navigate between your columns and your rows by tab or enter. You can also use the arrow keys that are on your keyboard. The thing to keep in mind as well is that you have a column and a row, and that column and row together, A1 for instance, A for the column, 1 for the row, that is going to be the cell that you're located in, and you work in a particular cell and you enter your information into that cell. And this final example today is talking about a little bit about setting up or working with your columns and rows. Your columns are listed with the letters of the alphabet, and this is where you should be putting any of your headings for information. Your rows run across the worksheet, and think of this as rows of information. So if you have census information for an individual, all of those questions that the enumerator asks and the information they gather are what should be in your columns, and then your row should be the row of information about a particular individual. Now in this instance, I came up with a worksheet for each individual that's in my database, and the types of information that I want here, because I want to be able to work with it, is their individual information, certain pieces of it, not everything. For my purposes, immigration is important, and so I've added that information. I want to know if I have their vital records information, and as you can see over here, I also want to know if I have census records for when they came to the United States. Now I've just played around with it a little bit, but this information is in each of these rows and columns. Cell A1 is the individual information. In column I1, running across these 3 columns, is going to be the immigration records. Here's going to be my vital records and church records, and that's in M through Q, and then the census is in S through AH. And as you can see, this is the way that Excel keeps adding columns. So I have added that information here, and what I wanted to show you is if we go back to the Home tab, which is where you're going to spend about 85% of your time if you're doing genealogy with Excel, is I've placed in cell A2 the full name. I've placed in B2 the given name, C2 the surname, and D2 the birth year. Now what I've done here is birth year is longer, as is death year, as is the census, as is some of these other things. So I've placed them for their alignment, opened up alignment, and I've set them on an angle counterclockwise. With the census, I have set that on a rotate text up. So you can play with any of these because they'll make your cell not as long, and that's something you want to think about when you're working with Excel, is how to get all of that information so you can see it on your worksheet easily and work with it. But this is just something that you can play with yourself. Now if I wanted this to no longer be angled, as you can see this is highlighted here because it's angled, I'd simply click on it and it would change the alignment back. So we can try that again. You see that it's highlighted, changes the alignment back. That's another thing to keep in mind with Excel. If you've done something like bottom align, which is what all of these are, it's highlighted here or grayed so you can see. If I wanted to change that to a center alignment or a top alignment, that's how it would show up. If I wanted it to be left aligned, centered, or right aligned, and that's a little hard to see on this one because of how that it's not very wide. And you just saw what I did. I went up to the column, and where this shows up here as kind of a cross, if you grab on it and slide it one way or the other, and this is just a mouse function, you can change the width of your cell. So now we could go back and take a look that it aligns particular ways. Now if we wanted to undo any of those alignments, we could play with any of them. We could undo one, or we could undo several. So when I was playing with the column width, and now it's back to how it started. So the reason that I went through all of this, and the reason that I've shown you how you can work with your columns and rows, I explain how I set them up. Go ahead and play with alignment. We took a look at the alignment here. This is going to tab back, decrease any indent you have. This is going to increase it. Keeping in mind that if you wanted to merge and center something with it, which is what I did here, as you can see, that's highlighted now. If I wanted to unmerge those cells, that's what it would look like. And then I could go back and take this information with Shift over to G, then I would just merge and center. And so this is one of those things that's kind of easy to play with. You can figure out how you want to merge your cells, and you can always unmerge them. So if I were entering information on rows 3 through 28 right here, I would know what I was doing because I'd be able to see row 2. However, once I got down to row 40, I wouldn't be able to see what I was doing. So let's take a look. I'm going to show you this real quick. If you go to View and you take a look at Freeze Panes, you can unfreeze panes, and that's what I'm doing with that first row. You can also freeze a top row, freeze a column, or freeze panes. And what you want to do in this instance is you want to go to row 3, click on Freeze Panes, and freeze those panes. Now what that's going to do is that's going to freeze everything above row 3. Okay? So as you scroll through your worksheet and you get down to perhaps row 60 or row 6000, you're still going to know what this information refers to. So that's just a little extra, getting ahead of ourselves on freezing some panes or freezing rows, and that's found in View, that View ribbon. It's in the Windows section, and it's in Freeze Panes.